Hey guys, it's Pastor John. So glad you are able to join me today for a lunch with St. Luke as we continue to follow Jesus as he begins his ministry in Galilee. If you remember our last episode, we kind of had a bit of a cliffhanger. We had a situation where Jesus was teaching and teaching authoritatively in the local synagogue, and there was an outburst. Actually, that idea of having outbursts during the middle of worship services reminds me of much of our ministry at C3, not so much during COVID, but during regular times. And that, of course, can always be challenging to navigate. So let's take a look today at how Jesus navigates an outburst. An outburst that, in this case, has a demonic source. And so we're going to look today here in episode 49. We're stepping back into our story again. Jesus is in Capernaum. Capernaum is located there at the kind of the north side, kind of like the northwest corner there of the Sea of Galilee, and he is ministering in the synagogue there. And if you remember from our last episode, again, there was an outburst. There was a demonic intruder inside of one of the people there in the synagogue and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the passage just briefly from last time. There was a demonic intruder inside of one of the people in the synagogue who had this outburst against Jesus. Leave us alone. What do you have to do with us, Jesus the Nazarene? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And again, the demonic intruders are not uncomfortable with making a kind of declaration of who Jesus is, because again, they're really honestly in that way hoping to throw people off the path, because who's going to, of course, believe the testimony of a demon, right? Of a person who's demonized, and obviously so. And so Jesus now has to deal with this outburst there in the synagogue, and so here's what he does. But Jesus rebuked him and said, "Be quiet and come out of him." Throwing him down before them, the demon came out of him without hurting him at all. Again, Jesus' response to what was going on there, actually a similar kind of activity to what Gandalf does in freeing Theoden from Saruman's influence. But Jesus' act here is rooted very solidly in, again, his own authority, in his sense of identity and his knowledge of his vocation. He rebukes the demon, silences the demon, and evicts the demon. Insists that the demon leave this man, and we're told here without a whole lot of description, without a whole lot of fanfare, just simply that it worked. That the guy was thrown to the ground and that the demon came out without hurting him at all. And here was the reaction, of course, of the crowd to what happened. Amazement came over them all. And they kept saying to one another, "What is this message? For he commands the unclean spirits with authority and power, and they come out." And news about him began to go out to every place in the vicinity. So again, the reaction of the crowd is one of amazement, and notice the link here. The link, we're talking about Jesus' teaching, and we're also talking about him practicing exorcism miracles. But there's actually a common denominator between the two. His teaching is rooted in his authority based on his identity, and of course his exorcisms are again based on his authority that's rooted in his identity. The simple truth of the matter is that even demonic forces are forced to obey Jesus. And there's something about who Jesus is that demands respect and obedience, and demands that even from those who are his enemies, even from demonic forces, even from those who are clearly not in alignment with his kingdom or his teachings at all. That even in such a case, his authority applies even there. That Jesus' authority is so strong. It's not only in his teaching, but also in his ability to handle these spiritual situations. Well, one of the things, of course, which we should ask as we start looking at Luke, we're going to see a number of places, a number of times where we're dealing with the supernatural, and particularly where we're seeing what has been in the past called demon possession. But I prefer the term demonization, where we're going to see some of that that's occurring, and Jesus practicing exorcism and evicting those demons. We're going to see some of that kind of spring up frequently throughout Luke, because of course it's a testimony to Jesus' authority to be able to handle those kind of negative spiritual situations. Of course, one question for us should be, in what ways do demonic forces influence us? Where are those areas of our life where we have perhaps harboring demonic intruders, or where perhaps there's a stronghold that's been built there? And one tool that I find helpful, I kind of base this off of some of Marcus Warner's teachings, but I call it fouls as a bit of a acrostic. But the idea is that the places where you're going to find the enemy embedded, the places where you're going to find demonic intruders in your life or in life of someone who you're mentoring, you can usually look for those situations where there is some kind of sin, where something has fouled up their spiritual life. So, we mentioned last time how Jesus' preaching and authority really kind of triggered the response there from the demons. And often, obviously, you shine some spiritual light, you're going to have moths that are sort of, in a counterintuitive sort of way drawn to it. But understand that perhaps even a better analogy for demons wouldn't be moths, but would be flies. Where there's manure, or where there's poop, you tend to have in those places, that's where flies gather. And so, where are you going to find demonic intruders? Where are you going to find spiritual strongholds that have to be taken care of? Where are you going to find those in places in your life or in the life of others where people are believing falsehoods? People are believing things that are lies, or making vows in agreement with false things. You're going to find one of the things which fouls up a spiritual life is occult activity. Anytime you are engaging in anything that's trying to gain hidden power, or trying to gain hidden knowledge apart from what God gives, that is terribly dangerous. And in fact, that tends to be the time when the sort of creepy manifestations that we tend to think of when we're thinking of demonic possession or demonization or demonic oppression. And those type of really intense manifestations tend to happen around occult activity. Unforgiveness. Now, this is a very common one for Christians. Very easy way to cede some ground in your mind to the enemy is by holding on to unforgiveness, by holding on to a grudge. And of course, lineage. Things which we inherit from our parents, things we inherit from our grandparents. That spiritual atmosphere in which we were brought up, there often are strongholds that need to be pulled down based on that. And then, of course, sin. Any place where there's unrepented of sin, any place where there's especially repeated unrepented of sin, that's the kind of place where the enemy can really get a foothold in a life. Now, we should, of course, see and celebrate the fact that in this passage, we are witness to Jesus. We are a witness to his authority, to his power to defeat these demonic forces. And what a beautiful thing that is. But one of the things I do want to encourage you to do, as you have, your time of devotion today, as you have your daily office, I want to really encourage you to spend some time really praying and asking Jesus if he would just make really clear to you, if he'd point out to you, what are those areas in your life where maybe you're just ceding some ground to the enemy? What are those areas in your life where perhaps there's a stronghold, or where perhaps you even have a demonic intruder there? I want you to really bring that before Jesus and ask him to point out to you any of those areas where your spiritual life has been fouled, or there's things that are fouling up your spiritual life. I want you to bring that before him and ask him to show you uh, where those problems are, so that, of course, you can bring that to him, and that he, in his authority, can help you find freedom. And we'll talk more about that and how you can find freedom from spiritual strongholds in the future and in future broadcasts. So, hey, appreciate you guys greatly. Hope you have a terrific day, and keep following Jesus.